So, the internet has been going crazy for a while about the recent events in Hong Kong, because it's the fucking internet and it always has to go crazy about something. But this time there's actually some substance to it. And somehow, Blizzard Entertainment, out of all people, managed to get themselves dragged into this. So, how did we get here? Well, first of all, I think it's worth mentioning that Blizzard were conducting business with a country that has a governing system that's pretty much the polar opposite of the Western world. So, what were the odds of a cultural clash happening there? But the Blizzard really deserved to be completely stomped over their questionable judgment and business strategy? Yes and no. Alright, so in case you still don't know what I'm on about and how Blizzard is related to Hong Kong, I'll give you a quick recap. Blizzard held a Grandmasters tournament for Hearthstone, where Blitzchung, the winner of said tournament, used the spotlight on the live stream to say some words in support of the Hong Kong riots, after which Blizzard promptly ended the stream, banned Blitzchung for a year from participating in any future events, took his prize money, and also laid off the two casters that supported Blitzchung in doing what he did. As of the release of this video though, things have changed a bit. Blitzchung's ban was reduced to 6 months instead of 12, his prize money was sent to him, and the two staff were also only temporarily suspended as opposed to being fired. Oh, and Blizzard also released a statement about the whole thing, in which they tried to appease everyone and obviously failed. Okay, so that's quite a lot to unpack, and I'm not a politician or a businessman. I'm just a random dude with a microphone and access to the internet, so I may not be the ray of knowledge that everybody's looking for, but here's how I see things from sort of an outside perspective. I don't know much about China or Hong Kong, so this whole incident actually prompted me to at least do a little bit of research before I run my mouth and find out how things led to the protests in the first place and why things are so fucked up. So without further ado, let's quickly learn some motherfucking history. Off of Wikipedia. So back in the first half of the 19th century, when the British Empire was on its way to only half of the entire fucking world, Hong Kong became part of the colony out of a squabble between the Western powers and the Chinese dynasty. Culture clash, being a thing back then too, resulted in two opium wars between 1839 and 1860, because the Brits and the French loved opium and all the money that comes out of trading it, and the Chinese not so much. Now, if it's not immediately obvious who the winner was in this conflict, I will reiterate that the Brits were on their way to owning half the fucking world, so it's no surprise they came out on top. But what the UK did after the conclusion of this war is simply amazing to me. They leased the entirety of Hong Kong from China under a 99-year contract. Yeah, that's right. You know how today you can lease a phone or a car for about 2 years? Well, the UK decided to lease an entire part of a country for almost a century. So, long story short, the first Opium War happened to force China into compliance with opium being legalized and regulated for trade in the Western world, and the second Opium War happened because the Chinese, well, they weren't compliant. At which point the UK took matters into their own hands and took Hong Kong under its occupation to establish a base of operations for trade within the Asian lands. Now this is where things get real spicy, because at the end of the 99-year lease, it was agreed that the British would allow the territory of Hong Kong to be integrated back into Chinese occupancy. That actually sounds pretty fair, right? Well, the problem here is that during these 99 years, in order to have said base of operations active for trade, the Empire of Stiff Upper Lip installed their own form of government, which led to a fairly democratic Hong Kong. Meanwhile, China fought its way out of colonialism in order to gain independence, and in 1950 the Communist Party fully took over and founded the People's Republic of China. So this should now shed a bit of light as to why things are pretty fucked up right now. The people of Hong Kong are essentially legally bound to be reintegrated into a now communist China. 1997 is the year the lease ended, and the joint agreement has been put in place for another 50 years of independence for Hong Kong. But this one apparently doesn't specify who gets what at the end of it, which is cool, but also a bit weird. I mean, the initial agreement was to switch sovereignty by the end of the 99-year lease, but then they went, nah mate, just give it like another 50 years or so. Come on, be a good chap. Now, obviously, there are still loads of things I don't know or fully understand. What I'm presenting here is merely the tip of the iceberg. The intricacies of every country or business in the world that have either political or economic interest in Hong Kong are simply far too wide and complex for my brain to ever be able to grasp them all or present them in this video. So I'm afraid this is the best I can do. A lot of people in the 20th century who were probably feeling the same way about this whole deal were really concerned with the future of Hong Kong, which resulted in mass immigrations of up to 500,000 people between 1987 and 1996. So while some people managed to avoid the conflict by simply leaving altogether, most of them stayed behind for pretty self-explanatory reasons and are currently facing the consequences. So yeah, life is shit, and I probably just ruined your whole evening with this video. You're welcome. But this all circling back to Blizzard. They are in no way an authority that has any say in how foreign nations should act. They aren't even an authority in the US, they're just a gaming company. And people like Senator Wyden or the people at Gods Unchained should know that, but it's pretty obvious they're making aggressive statements because they're in a position where they can only benefit from it. Now, I don't mean this video to be a slap in the face to the people who are currently boycotting Blizzard. In fact, all things considered, this is probably one of the most diplomatic forms of boycott ever. People just stopped using Blizzard services, canceled their subs or their accounts, and took it to Twitter to voice their displeasure. And in a day and age where businesses abuse commodity and availability, this is probably one of the best ways of retaliating without violence. It's great that people are speaking up on issues like these because it's the only way we, as a species, can properly shape what should and shouldn't be acceptable in our society. But I think it's also fair to mention that Blizzard were simply dealt a horribly bad hand. At the core of it, they were only interested in maintaining their relationship with China for their own benefit, sure. But this isn't just some minor disagreement like, hey, where are we eating tonight? McDonald's. Blizzard actively standing for Blitzchung would pretty much mean an active stance against the communist regime. And the communists, well, they don't really deal very well with opposition, to say the least. Call them cowards if you want, but this is the kind of animosity that leads to economic war. And this wouldn't only affect Blizzard. There are literally hundreds of businesses that rely in some form or another on Chinese labor. We have AT&T, Adidas, Acer, Armani, Apple, Best Buy, Best Foods, Body Shop, CBC, CCTV, Coca-Cola, Dell Computer, Dollar Tree Stores, Eastman Kodak, Electric Vehicles, FedEx, Fossil, Gap, Gillette, Google, Gucci, Home Depot, Heinz Foods, Hershey Foods, Harley Davidson, IBM, IKEA, Intel, Johnson & Johnson, KFC, Kmart, Lexmark, LG, Logitech, McDonald's, Nescafe, Nestle, Nike, Nokia, Nvidia, Papa John's, Pizza Hut, Radio Shack, Samsung, Sony, Starbucks, Subway, Tommy Hilfiger, Victoria's Secret, Walgreens, Walt Disney, Walmart, Yahoo, and many, many more. That's a lot. Ranging from foods to furniture to clothing and everything in between. Hundreds if not thousands of businesses that either partially rely on Chinese labor or fully rely on it. And if these businesses should suffer, it would transfer to millions of job losses and an economic crisis that would affect the entire world. Now, obviously this is pretty much a double-edged sword. China also relies on these businesses for its economic stability. Otherwise, well, they wouldn't be in the business. But that's not necessarily enough to thwart a conflict. There can be outside interests that would make this kind of war not only happen, but also make it really long and really painful for everybody. So try to put yourself into Blizzard's shoes for a second here and tell me you would have acted differently when, on one hand, you upset a bunch of people, and on the other hand, you'll at best go into bankruptcy and at worst, potentially start World War III. Yeah, I don't know about you, but that pretty much sounds like an ultimatum to me. And then there are, of course, the terms and conditions. You know, that thing that nobody reads, but everybody just accepts and takes for granted? Those are there for precisely these types of situations. In order for companies to protect themselves from potential lawsuit or political conflict, they ask that you agree ahead of time to a list of things that they don't want you to do. And you are free to either accept them and continue collaboration, or refuse them and be on your way. And I understand that the argument here is that Blizzard are impeding freedom of speech by enforcing the terms and conditions in this particular situation where it's used for noble purposes. But the terms and conditions are by design an impediment from you doing or saying whatever you want. They are conceptually anti-free speech, and they aren't there specifically to prevent people from doing things out of some malicious intent. They're there to separate the company from any outside threat and to guarantee a free slate under difficult circumstances. This is how businesses in general guarantee that we all are no more than mere tools in their playground, disposable at any sign of threat. Even more so, we are legally disposable. Now I know this all sounds terrible, especially with the way I've phrased things here, but these kinds of legal barriers haven't been created out of a desire to subjugate humanity. They've been created out of the need for companies to protect themselves from people that go into court simply for the sake of making a quick buck. Just Google lawsuits against companies right now and you'll find dozens of ludicrous examples. Those are only the ones getting covered by the media. Starting your own business is difficult enough that most people will never start their own business based on that thought alone. And being exposed to bankruptcy is not going to encourage anybody to participate. Why is it important to encourage people to do business, you ask? Well, this doesn't fully apply across the board. But take Japan as an example. You know Japan. It's that place where one of the best shows in the world has been created. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it now. And also one of the worst shows in the world has been created there. And if you haven't seen this one, you're okay. I've recently learned that the Japanese are famous, or in this case infamous, for the terrible geographical circumstances that they find themselves in. Not only are they affected by earthquakes, volcanoes, and tsunamis, which, on top of, killing you, also prevents them from producing nuclear energy to run their electricity. Look up Fukushima if you want more reasons to be depressed today. No, not only that, but their entire island is mostly covered by mountains, has no fossil fuel or coal, and basically their entire raw material production consists of some agriculture and fishing. So yeah, we live in a day and age where people think that everybody should be able to have everything they ever wanted, and yet here we have an example of a nation, powerful nation, you wouldn't take Japan for a joke, that today still entirely depends on being able to import from other countries. They are desperately in need of people that are capable to go into the business world and create products that have value for money so they can keep trade going and ensure their survival. Now, if your government forces you into a business you have no interest in for the benefit of the entire country, you have communism on your hands. So instead of doing that, what the government can do is encourage businesses for those who are interested. So by now, I hope you understand why I'm not particularly mad at Blizzard or Blitzchung, or even China in this particular instance for that matter. The whole world is just one big circle jerk of give and take, and all we can really do is learn from the past and apply ourselves for the best possible future. But if you do understand all of this and you're still angry, then what are you really angry at? Blizzard for doing something literally every other brand would have done, or the system as a whole because you feel like it's disproportionately favored towards big businesses? All I can really say is keep yourself informed. Know what it is you're fighting for and the consequences that come with it. And most importantly, know when and where you should be fighting for your beliefs. So to finally end this video, do I think Blizzard are in the wrong? Yes and no. Do I think Blitzchung is in the wrong? Yes and no. Am I ever going to make another political video and give my brain a seizure by going through all sorts of websites full of legal speak? Yes and definitely no.